Hey guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're having another episode of the Sword and Sorcery Book Club. Today we're looking at The Bloody Crown of Conan, and specifically we're going to be looking at The People of the Black Circle. It's going to be basically just a review of a single story in this book, and thankfully that's possible in this one because this one only has 3 stories in it. The first one being The People of the Black Circle, the second one being The Hour of the Dragon, which is the only Conan novel that Robert E. Howard ever wrote, and the third one is A Witch Shall Be Born. And I'm hoping to read A Witch Shall Be Born this month, but I don't know if I will. It really depends on what I end up doing with myself this month. So, yeah, I really enjoyed the first collection of this. This is the second one. There's a third one. I think it's called The Conquering Sword of Conan. And I'm going to do this in the same kind of style as I did the previous ones, but there's going to be more focus here. And it might be much better for you guys to watch than last time because I'm actually reviewing a story instead of just talking about the content of the book, right? So, yeah, I'm going to start with the introduction and the foreword, and then we'll move on to the review of the story. So just feel free to scroll through the sections that you like and only watch the ones that you're interested in, right? So, honestly, just skip to the story review, right? So, yeah, the foreword here is by Gary Gianni. He's the artist for this book, and it's a pretty interesting story, or a bit of an interesting essay here to start with, because Gary Gianni decides to focus in on the fact that, yes, in modern life, we don't really have these great examples of human violence and human power and strength and will, right? Most people don't really do anything that can convey that. And so that's why we find ourselves enthralled by characters like Conan, who basically live by their sword, who basically exist through or thanks to this explosive violence and this ability of the indomitable spirit of humanity, right? And he illustrates this by saying that, you know, this is something, this is enthralling because of what I just mentioned, but also there are still moments in our day-to-day lives where we might see that. And he illustrates this by showing us a bit of a story from his childhood, where he saw this man knock down a shed or a house in their backyard, and how all of the kids came to see, and this man ferociously tore it down, and the impact that had on him, especially as he started to find the Conan paperbacks of the time. So that's really cool. I really like that. He also mentions that he did art for Solomon Kane. I don't remember that from the bit of Solomon Kane that I've read, but maybe he was talking about something else, maybe a comic book or something. But yeah, I thought this was a cool foreword. Then we had an introduction by Rusty Burke. He talks about what Conan is. Is it fantasy? Is it fiction? Is it historical? You know, is it horror? Is it not? What is it, right? And he says it's both and neither. And he talks about the interest that Howard had, that Robert E. Howard had, in the transition from barbarism to civilization, that many, basically maybe all cultures in our history have gone through. And he mentions that Robert E. Howard wrote to one of his friends about the fact that, you know, he was really interested in that portion of the world. And he has this example of, like, Robert E. Howard's interest in Mongolians in the early ages before they became the rulers of China. And, you know, as someone that is actually interested in the time period, thanks to a book I read as a high schooler, I agree. That's probably the most interesting bit. I don't really care too much about Kublai Khan. I really only care about Genghis Khan. I think that transition from Genghis Khan to his grandson Kublai is really kind of not all that interesting. The really good parts about the Mongolian history and their ability to take over the world is in those early days, right? As they go from, you know, people of the steppe to this awesome, massive empire, right? So I thought that was really, really cool. And I really agreed with that. So I really enjoyed that. So that's it for that. Let's look at the story now. So The People of the Black Circle, it's 10 chapters long. It has, each chapter has a name, which is really cool. That's not something that Robert E. Howard did all that often. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. He did it for all of these, which is really cool. And this is the longest story of Conan's that I've read so far, at least I think so. And broadly speaking, it didn't even feel like too much of a Conan story for the first half of it. It mostly just felt like I could have been reading an old Borak story. And I think that's interesting. It does have this kind of like Middle Eastern, kind of like or Far East kind of vibe to it, because the characters that we're following are the Hyborian Age version of India. The Vedayans, I think is what they're called. They're essentially, Pakistani or Indian characters. The female character that we follow here is called Yasmina. And they're being assailed by Turan, who I think is supposed to be Turkey, or Ottoman Turkey specifically. And Conan is this weird Western guy that just ended up in this part of the world, very similar to Old Borak, right? So overall, I think it's pretty good. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favorite, but the ending was pretty awesome. I really, really enjoyed that part. So it has mostly a historical fiction feeling. It does end up having some great sword and sorcery aspects near the end of it, though. So it opens up with the death of an Indian king, or of a Vedayan king, and his despondent sister, Yasmina, who gets elevated to the status of queen, essentially. Although she doesn't necessarily have to rule the country, she has to make the decisions at the end, right? And this death is caused by the Black Seers, who live up in the mountain in the Himalayas. And Yasmina swears revenge. She goes in search of this important guy in the city called Karim Shah, who is a Turan. He's a Ottoman Turkish guy, or equivalent to. And as she enters, it turns out that Conan snuck into his office and takes this opportunity to steal her away. And he's going to do this, or he does this because he wants to use her as a bargaining chip to get his 7 men that were captured back into his hands, so that the men that he's currently leading, who are Afghani, I think, or Afghali, I think is what they're called in the Hyborian Age. So they get off his back about it, and they continue to follow his orders without too much complaining, right? So as Conan steals her away, they escape into the mountains. They're caught by the Wazuli, but Conan manages to evade problems caused by that by being friends of their leader, thanks to saving his life at one point earlier on in some other story that we don't know, right? And this works out pretty well for them. They're kind of safe for a while, and then this other character called Khesam, or Khesam, Khemsa. I want to say Khesam because the KH is like a H sound in Farsi, I think. So I think that's what I wanted to go with, but I'll just go with Khesam to make it easier for myself. And he has hypnotic abilities, hypnotic powers, thanks to being an acolyte of the Black Seers. And he uses this to mess up Conan's plan by getting the Wazuli men to try to chase him off and fight him, and to chase him across the mountains. Conan and Yasmina manage to escape further into the mountains. They end up at Yimsha, which is the part of the mountains, the part of the Himalayas where the Black Seers have their temple, or their place of living, I guess, their adobe. And then suddenly this weird bloody hurricane / tornado comes down the mountain and kills some people. Khesam shows up and confronts him. Conan manages to win the altercation because he is not able to be hypnotized for 2 reasons. One, his will is pretty strong, so he doesn't fall into it that much. But secondly, because he didn't grow up in this part of the world, he doesn't have superstitions around the power of hypnotism, and so he doesn't have like a primer ready to get him under the control easier than otherwise, right? And so we get to see this kind of I don't know what to call it, like superior ideology kind of come to the surface. The fact that Conan doesn't believe in hypnotism makes it harder for it to work on him. And so he has an edge here, and that's pretty cool. I like that. I think it's interesting. Let's see. Yasmina is taken, even though Conan technically wins the exchange. Then 4 figures kind of arrive out of nowhere. They do this weird, like, I want to call it a hockey attack, right? Like, they use Conqueror's Hockey, which is, I think, from One Piece, which basically means that they exert their will onto others, and they force everyone around them to crumble due to the sheer weight of their will, right? And Yasmina is taken, this time taken away from Khesam, or Khemsa, and Gitara, Khemsa's girlfriend and Yasmina's handmaiden, is thrown down the mountain, and so is Khemsa after he chases after her. And this is important because Kemsha basically rebelled against the Black Seers in order to take power for himself, and he was in love with Kitara, and it doesn't work out for them, right? Later, we come back to Conan, who finds Kemsha crawling, even though his body is completely broken, crawling to try to get to Yimsha again to fight the Black Seers for stealing his the love of his life, right? From removing her from her mortal coil, I guess. Kemsha knows that he's dying though, and he sees Conan, and so he gives him his girdle, which will offer him some magical protection and some advice about how to walk through Yimsha and how to get through this place and what to do to kill the Black Seers. And then Conan leaves. He finds Karim, and they go into the Seers' lair. In a bit of a crazy frenzy here, Conan manages to kill some of the Seers after they trap them. Here, he finds Yasmina. He fights with this giant snake, which is something we don't get to see him do all that often in the stories, but he does quite often in the comic books and the movies. And I loved it. I thought this was a great situation here, and it turns out pretty clearly that the snake is also the overlord of the Black Seers. He is the guy that's in charge of them, who happens to be this ancient sorcerer that's lived for thousands of years. And I guess he had a pact with Set or something, and that's why he can turn into a snake. I'm not really sure, but they manage to fight the snake, hurt it enough that it goes away, and they escape. Yasmina and Conan argue about what they're gonna do now. Yasmina and Conan have kind of managed to fall in love throughout their ordeal, and Yasmina wants to be taken back to her town. Conan's like, no, why would I do that? I'll just take you with me, and you'll become my wife on the road, sort of. And they continue arguing when they see that there's two armies coming at them. One is the Turanian army who's coming down towards them, and then Yasmina's army is coming up to them, right? And the Turan army is fighting against the Afghalis and the Wazuli, and so Yasmina strikes a deal with Conan. She says, let me go down to my army, you go save your men, and I will come help you, and we will fight off the Turanians together, and then we'll decide what to do afterwards. And so that's what they agreed to do. Conan rushes down into the valley to save his men. He manages to get them to listen to him, and then Yasmina arrives a bit later to take on the Turans, and they manage to make them run away, ish, right? And then we have this final moment between Conan and Yasmina where they kind of teasingly argue with each other about what they're gonna do. Conan is like, or Yasmina tells Conan that he could be her king, and he's like, no, if I'm gonna take you, I will do it with my own hands, with my own force, with men at my back, and against your walls, right? And so she agrees to that, and she basically sends him on his way to come back to get her eventually. And I thought this was really good. I really, really enjoyed this. I don't know if this has been adapted. I'm sure it has. If it has, let me know down below where it was so I can track it down, because I really enjoyed this. I thought this was a really good story. The beginning of it was a bit slow. It wasn't really my favorite. There's some historical fiction aspects to it that I was not that interested in. But ultimately, the fight against the Seers, the relationship between Conan and Yasmina was really awesome. And broadly speaking, I had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, the thing is that I'm my preference so far seems to be for Robert E. Howard's stories that are a bit shorter. I think that once he starts getting a bit longer, more than 5 chapters, he's getting to the point where his ability as a writer is still strong and powerful. It's just like a bit dull for that length of storytelling, at least in my opinion, right? At least for me. And so I think I'm finding that I prefer the shorter Conan stories more so than these ones that are trying to be a bit longer. So I'm really curious to see how I'm gonna feel about A Witch Shall Be Born and about The Hour of the Dragon once I get around to reading it, probably next year for Sumerian September. So yeah, those are my thoughts on The People of the Black Circle. Let me know what you thought down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you guys later.